You never think it's going to happen to you. Affairs are something you hear about, something that happens to other people, on TV, in books, maybe to a friend of a friend. But not to you. Not to your wife. At least, that's what I thought. My name is Jake Turner. I'm 38 years old, and for the past 15 years, I was married to the love of my life, or at least, the woman I thought she was. Her name is Emily, and she was the kind of woman who could walk into a room and command attention without trying. Not just because she was beautiful, though she was, dark hair, sharp green eyes, a smile that made you feel like the only man in the world. No, it was more than that. She had this quiet confidence, this way of making people feel important, like they mattered. I fell for her fast. We met in college, and from the moment she laughed at my terrible pickup line at a party, I knew I was done for. We got married young, struggled together, built a life, made sacrifices. I worked as a contractor, and she started as a marketing assistant. We didn't have much at first, but we were happy. Or so I thought. Things started changing a couple of years ago. Emily had climbed the corporate ladder fast, landing a job at a big firm downtown. She worked long hours, and at first, I was proud of her. I bragged about her to my friends, about how hardworking and ambitious she was. I didn't mind picking up the slack at home. I thought that's what a good husband did. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. She started dressing a little differently, classier, more expensive. She began talking about work constantly, especially about her boss, Richard Langford. Now, you might have heard that name before. Richard Langford, CEO of Langford Enterprises, billionaire, philanthropist, the whole deal. The kind of guy who had his face on magazine covers. He was in his mid-50s, old enough to be Emily's father, but still sharp, powerful. The kind of man who walked into a room and expected the world to bend for him. I laughed about it at first. I even joked about it. "So, how's your billionaire boyfriend?" I'd tease when she mentioned him. She'd roll her eyes and sweep me away, telling me I was ridiculous. I believed her. I shouldn't have. The first real red flag came about 6 months ago. Emily started working late. A lot. Too much. At first, she gave me reasonable explanations, big projects, tight deadlines. But then she started coming home smelling different. Not just perfume, but hotel soap, expensive cologne that I knew wasn't mine. I told myself I was paranoid. That I was imagining things. Then one night, she didn't come home at all. I called her, texted, nothing. Morning came, and still no word. I was out of my mind with worry, thinking something had happened to her. Then, just after 9 a.m., she strolled in like nothing had happened. "Where the hell were you?" I asked, my voice shaking. She barely blinked. "I stayed at a friend's place. I was too tired to drive home." "Which friend?" A pause. Too long. She wasn't a good liar, not yet anyway. "Melissa," she said. I called Melissa later that day. She had no idea what I was talking about. That was the moment I knew. Not suspected. Knew. But I still didn't want to believe it. Because if I admitted it, if I faced the truth, it meant my entire marriage, the life we built, was a lie. I started paying attention. She got secretive with her phone, turned it face down when she was near me. She started dressing up on random nights, claiming she was just meeting the girls. And then, one night I followed her. It felt ridiculous, like I was in some bad movie. I tailed her car from a few cars back, hands sweating on the wheel. She drove downtown to the Langford Hotel, one of the most expensive places in the city. And I watched her step out of the car, straighten her dress, and walk inside. With him. Richard Langford. He had his hand on the small of her back, guiding her through the lobby like she was something he owned. And maybe, in some way, he did. I sat there in my truck for hours, stomach twisting, hoping, praying, that I was wrong. That maybe there was some explanation. There wasn't. She didn't come home that night either. The confrontation was ugly. I waited until the next evening, when she walked through the door like nothing had happened. I was already sitting at the kitchen table, her phone in my hands. "Who is he?" I asked. She froze. Just for a second. But that second told me everything. "Jake! Don't lie to me! Who is he?" Her mouth opened, closed. Then, in a quiet voice, she said, "It's not what you think." I laughed. I actually laughed. "Not what I think? So you didn't spend last night in a hotel with Richard Langford?" She went pale. "How did you? How did I know?" I stood up, slamming the phone down. "Jesus, Emily. You didn't even try to hide it." And then came the worst part. She didn't beg. She didn't cry. She just looked at me, eyes filled with something close to pity. "Jake, I didn't mean for this to happen. But it did," I said, my voice hollow. She didn't deny it. I wish I could say I stormed out, that I left right then and there with my dignity intact. But I didn't. I stayed. I yelled. I pleaded. But she had already made her choice. She moved out a week later. Straight into a penthouse Langford owned. The divorce papers came soon after. I lost everything. The woman I loved. The life we built. And for what? Money? Power? Some nights, I tell myself she'll regret it. That she'll wake up one day, look at the empty space beside her, and wish she could undo it all. But deep down, I know the truth. She never looked back. And I was just another casualty in the price of ambition. People like to say that time heals all wounds. That's a damn lie. Some wounds don't heal. They just scab over, waiting for the right moment to rip open again. After Emily left, I went through the motions. Signed the divorce papers. Packed up the house we were supposed to grow old in. Sold off the furniture we picked out together. I tried to stay busy, threw myself into work, spent more time at the gym, hit the bars with friends who suddenly weren't sure what to say to me. But nothing really helped. Nights were the worst. The silence. The way my bed felt too big, too empty. I'd reach out in my sleep sometimes, expecting to find her there, only to wake up alone. I should have hated her. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But love doesn't just switch off like that. And that's what made it worse. She was moving on, living in luxury, wrapped in silk sheets in a penthouse with a billionaire. And me? I was still here. Drinking too much. Sleeping too little. Wasting away in the ruins of a life I thought was mine. Then came the news. It was about 2 months after she left when I saw it. A friend sent me a link. Billionaire Richard Langford engaged to former employee. Her picture was there, right beside his. She was glowing, radiant in a way I hadn't seen in years. Not since before everything changed. Engaged. 2 months after leaving me. I stared at the screen for what felt like forever, the words blurring. She was going to marry him. Be his wife. His. The rage hit me all at once. I grabbed the nearest thing, an old glass from the coffee table, and hurled it against the wall. It shattered, shards scattering across the floor, but it didn't make me feel any better. None of it did. I thought about calling her. Yelling. Begging. Something. But what would that accomplish? She made her choice. And she had everything now. The money, the lifestyle, the security. What did I have? A 6-pack of cheap beer and a 1-bedroom apartment that smelled like sawdust and loneliness. I should have let it go. I should have just walked away. But I didn't. Instead, I went looking for answers. And what I found changed everything. I wasn't looking for closure. Closure is a damn fairy tale people tell themselves to feel better. No, I wanted something else, the truth. Because the more I thought about it, the less it made sense. Emily and I had been together for 15 years. We built a life from nothing. You don't just throw that away overnight. You don't fall out of love that fast. Unless you weren't in love for a long time. Or worse, maybe you never were. So I did what any self-respecting, broken, and slightly drunk man would do. I started digging. It wasn't hard. Money and power leave trails, and Langford had plenty of both. I started with Emily's old job, reached out to a guy I knew who still worked at the firm, a guy who owed me a favor. "You really want to go down this road, man?" he asked. "I need to know," I said. He sighed, then sent me a file. A single PDF. No subject line. What I saw made my stomach drop. Expense reports. Dinner receipts. Hotel bookings. All paid for by Langford Enterprises. Going back over a year. A year. While I was home making dinner, fixing leaks in our house, rubbing her feet when she was stressed, she was spending nights in penthouses with him. She was smiling in my face while lying through her teeth. I should have stopped there. I should have accepted it, buried it, moved on. But I didn't. Because there was one last thing that didn't add up. Why did Langford marry her so fast? And that's when I found out the biggest betrayal of all. Emily wasn't just sleeping with him. She was pregnant. Pregnant. The words stared back at me from the email like a bullet to the chest. I read it again, then a third time, hoping I was seeing things. But the message was clear. My guy at her old firm had slipped me one last bit of info, a rumor at the office, something that had been circulating before she even left me. Emily was pregnant with his child. Not mine. His. I stood there in my tiny, half-empty apartment, the walls pressing in on me. My hands were shaking. A year. She had been screwing him for a year while coming home to me. Lying. Kissing me. Saying she loved me. And all the while, she had been planning this. The fast engagement suddenly made sense. It wasn't love. It wasn't some whirlwind romance. It was about securing her future. Because if people found out she was carrying his child while still married to me, that would have been a scandal. Bad press for him. A stain on her reputation. So she left. Clean break. No loose ends. She let me sit there like a fool, heartbroken, wondering what went wrong, while the truth was, she had already moved on before I even knew it was over. And the worst part? I never even had a chance. I don't remember much about the rest of that night. I know I drank too much. I know I punched a hole in the drywall, which I later had to fix because the landlord was already on my ass about my security deposit. And I know that, at some point, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let this break me. Because Emily? She had already won. She had the money. The power. The new life. But me? I had nothing left to lose. And that made me dangerous. Something inside me snapped that night. I wasn't going to be some broken ex-husband sitting around feeling sorry for himself while my wife played house with a billionaire. No, I was done being the fool. Done being the guy who got left behind. So I did what any sane, rational man in my position would do. I decided to crash their wedding. Now, I know how that sounds. Crazy, desperate. Maybe a little pathetic. But you have to understand, this wasn't just about Emily anymore. It wasn't just about her cheating, or even about the kid she was carrying. It was about me. I needed her to see me. I needed him to see me. To know that I wasn't some nobody they could just brush aside like I never mattered. So I put on my best suit, the same one I wore to our anniversary dinner the year before, back when I still thought we had a future, and made my way to the Langford estate. That's where they were holding it. Not a church, not a hotel. No, when you're worth billions, you don't need a venue. You just throw your wedding at your private mansion, complete with gold-trimmed invitations and security at every entrance. But they weren't expecting me. And that was their first mistake. I knew I couldn't just walk through the front gates, not unless I wanted to get tackled by security before I even made it to the champagne table. So I waited. Watched. Plotted. And then, right as one of the catering vans pulled up, I saw my opening. It was almost too easy. I walked up, dressed like I belonged, grabbed a tray of glasses from the back, and strolled right past security. No one even gave me a second glance. Rich people never look at the help. The party was already in full swing by the time I made it inside. Classical music. Waiters in white gloves. chandeliers the size of my entire apartment. And there she was. Emily. Dressed in white. Smiling. Holding his hand. Carrying his child. I felt like I was drowning. But I wasn't leaving. Not yet. Not until I had my moment. And when the time came, I made damn sure they would never forget it. I should have felt nervous. I should have felt out of place, surrounded by millionaires and politicians, the kind of people who spend more on a bottle of wine than I made in a month. But all I felt was cold. This wasn't just some wedding. This was the funeral of my marriage. I weaved through the crowd, keeping my head down, still holding the tray I'd swiped from the caterers. I could hear laughter, clinking glasses, the soft hum of an orchestra in the background. Everyone was here to celebrate them, the perfect couple, the fairy tale romance. I wanted to scream. Instead, I kept moving. Watching. Waiting. And then I saw him. Richard Langford. Standing by the bar, shaking hands with men in suits that probably cost more than my truck. He had that same smug, effortless confidence I'd seen in pictures. Like he was untouchable. Like the world existed to serve him. And beside him? Emily. She was glowing, radiant in a way I hadn't seen in years. A hand rested on her stomach, his child growing inside her. Not mine. I should have turned around. Should have walked away. But then she saw me. And for the first time in months, I saw something real flash across her face. Panic. I smiled. Just a little. Then I raised my glass. And in a voice loud enough to turn heads I said, "To the happy couple." The room went silent. I felt the eyes of 100 strangers settle on me, but I didn't care. My gaze was locked on her. Emily opened her mouth, maybe to stop me, maybe to beg, but it was too late. I wasn't finished. "To Emily," I said, voice steady. "My wife. Or at least she was. Right up until she got pregnant with another man's child." A murmur spread through the crowd, whispers, gasps. Richard's face darkened, his grip tightening on his glass. I took a step closer, my pulse hammering. "And to you, Mr. Langford." I let the words hang between us. "I just have one question." I smiled. "Tell me, does she lie to you the way she lied to me?" For a moment, no one moved. No one breathed. The weight of my words crashed over the room like a tidal wave, sending whispers rippling through the crowd. People turned to each other, murmuring, their perfectly manicured illusions of the happy couple beginning to crack. And Emily? She looked like she was about to faint. Her face had gone pale, her lips parted in shock. She wasn't expecting this. She thought I was gone, buried, forgotten. A part of her past that didn't exist anymore. But I wasn't done existing. Not yet. Richard Langford, to his credit, didn't react right away. He was a businessman, after all. He knew how to handle bad press, how to stay composed. But I saw it, the flicker of doubt in his eyes. Because now, everyone was looking at him. Waiting. Wondering. Had the great Richard Langford really stolen another man's wife? Had his perfect, untouchable empire been built on nothing but a home-wrecking scandal? Slowly, he set his glass down on the bar. Then, in that calm, arrogant voice of his, he said, "You should leave." A threat. Polished, sophisticated, but a threat all the same. I stepped closer. "Or what?" I asked, my voice quiet. Security was already moving toward me. I could hear them coming. Heavy footsteps. The shifting of expensive suits. But I didn't move. Not until I said what I came here to say. I turned back to Emily, and for the first time, I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Regret. Maybe she wasn't expecting to feel it. Maybe she thought she had moved on. That I was nothing but a chapter in her past. But in that moment, with the whole room watching, she knew. She hadn't just traded me for something better. She had sold her soul for a man who wouldn't hesitate to throw her away the second she became inconvenient. And I wanted her to sit with that. To feel it. So I leaned in, just close enough for her to hear me over the hum of the stunned crowd. You deserve each other. And then I let them throw me out. The second the security guards grabbed me, I didn't fight. I let them drag me through the grand hall, past the stunned guests, past the towering floral displays and gold-trimmed decor. I let them throw me out like garbage, tossing me onto the cold marble steps of the Langford estate. Because I had already won. The doors slammed shut behind me. The sounds of the wedding faded into the night, but I didn't need to hear them to know what was happening inside. Doubt. Whispers. Suspicion. The cracks had started to form. And Emily? She would have to spend the rest of the night explaining, to Richard, to his family, to every rich, powerful guest at that party. No matter what she said, no matter how she tried to spin it, people would always wonder. That was enough. For now. I walked down the steps, the cold air biting at my skin. I didn't have a plan after this. I didn't know what came next. I had spent so much time drowning in anger, in betrayal, in the need to do something, anything, to make her feel the way she made me feel. But standing there, under the city lights, I realized something. It was over. Not just my marriage. Not just my love for her. The war I had been fighting in my own head, the need to prove something, to hold on to the past, it was done. Emily was gone. And for the first time since she left, I didn't care anymore. I should have gone home. I should have let the night end there. But fate had other plans. Because as I reached my truck, my phone buzzed. A message from a number I hadn't seen in months. Emily. I stared at the screen, my pulse steady. 4 words. I need to talk. I exhaled. Then, slowly, I climbed into my truck and replied. Too late. And then I blocked her. For good. Or so I thought. Because less than a week later, I got a call that would change everything. Emily was in the hospital. And the baby? It wasn't Richard's. I stared at the phone, my mind blank. The baby wasn't Richard's. The words didn't make sense. They couldn't. Emily had left me for him. Had built her entire new life around him. And now, just like that, it was all crumbling? I almost didn't go to the hospital. Almost ignored the call. But a part of me, the part that still remembered the woman I had loved, the years we had shared, wouldn't let me. So I went. And what I found nearly broke me all over again. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and bad memories. I walked through the halls, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead, my fists clenched. I didn't know what I was expecting, but when I stepped into her room, I barely recognized her. Emily was lying in bed, looking small, fragile, nothing like the radiant, confident woman I had seen at her wedding. Her skin was pale, her eyes sunken, and when she turned to look at me, she actually looked relieved. "Jake," she breathed. And I hated that it still did something to me. I didn't sit. Didn't move closer. Just stood there, arms crossed. "Why am I here?" She swallowed hard. Because I have no one else." For the first time since she left, I saw fear in her eyes. Not the fear of being caught, not guilt over what she had done, real fear. "What happened?" My voice was flat. Detached. Her fingers gripped the thin hospital blanket. "Richard, he left." Her voice cracked. "The moment he found out the baby wasn't his." I felt nothing. Not satisfaction. Not sympathy. Just nothing. She kept going. "He had a paternity test done behind my back. As soon as the results came in, he packed my things, cut off my credit cards, had security escort me out. I barely had enough cash to get a motel for the night." She let out a bitter laugh. "One minute I was his fiancée, the next? I was nothing." My jaw tightened. "And now you want what? My pity?" "No." She shook her head, eyes glistening. I need you to know. I was wrong. About everything." Silence stretched between us. And then she whispered, "I think I always loved you more." I let out a slow breath. And then, finally, I asked the one question I had been avoiding. "Is it mine?" She didn't answer right away. She didn't have to. I already knew. The baby she was carrying, the baby she had destroyed our marriage over, was mine. I should have felt something. Anger. Relief. Maybe even some twisted sense of justice. But all I felt was tired. Emily sat there, waiting for me to say something, anything, but I couldn't. Because where the hell do you even start with something like that? She had burned our life to the ground for a man who threw her away the second she became inconvenient. She had lied, cheated, and humiliated me, and now, she wanted me to pick up the pieces? I exhaled slowly. Why didn't you tell me? My voice was quieter than I expected. Emily swallowed hard. I thought it would be easier if it was his. She let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. I was wrong. Yeah. No shit. She looked at me then, really looked at me. And for the first time, I saw the weight of what she had done finally sinking in. I messed up, Jake, she whispered. I was selfish. Stupid. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Her voice broke. But please, don't hate our child for my mistakes. And there it was. The only thing that mattered. It wasn't about Emily anymore. It wasn't about revenge, or heartbreak, or the years I had wasted on her. It was about the child she was carrying. My child. I ran a hand down my face, feeling the exhaustion settle deep in my bones. Do you even want to keep it? I asked. Her breath hitched. Yes. I closed my eyes for a long moment. Then, finally I said, then we figure it out. Not for her. Not for us. But for the kid. Because at the end of the day, they didn't ask for any of this. Emily let out a shaky breath, nodding. And as I turned to leave, she whispered, Jake? I stopped but didn't turn around. Do you think we could ever? No. My voice was firm. Final. I glanced back at her, meeting her eyes one last time. I'll be there for the baby. But you and me? We're done. She nodded, tears slipping down her face. And for the first time since she left, I knew, really knew, that I was finally free.